Hello, welcome back. I am Russell, and we are going through the React Foundations course found on the nextjs.org website. If you haven't done so already, go back and watch the other videos in this playlist. We are on Chapter 6, Displaying Data with Props. Learn what props are and how you can use them to display data. So let's get right into it. So far, if you were to reuse your header component, it would display the same content both times, right? So if we wrote it twice, it would be displayed twice. So we can actually just try this. Go to our page, and there we go. We have our content twice. But what if you want to pass different text, or if you don't know the information ahead of time because you're fetching data from an external source? So imagine you made on an e-commerce site a card component that holds some product, and maybe each card should hold different products, right? We don't want to just list one product over and over. We want different content for each card, and we can think of those as separate components. So regular HTML elements have attributes that you can use to pass pieces of information that change the behavior of those elements. For example, changing the src attribute of an image element changes the image that is shown. Changing the href attribute of an a tag changes the destination of the link. In the same way, you can pass pieces of information as properties to React components. These are called props, also known as properties. Take, for instance, the possible variations of a button. So we could have a primary, a secondary, or disabled, and these are styling changes, right? So the primary is blue, the secondary is gray, and the disabled, the text is grayed out. Similar to a JavaScript function, you can design components that accept custom arguments or props that change the component's behavior or what is visibly shown when it's rendered to the screen. Then you can pass down these props from parent components to child components. Note, in React, data flows down the component tree. This is referred to as one-way data flow. State, which will be discussed in the next chapter, can be passed from parent to child components as props. So what that means is when we think about the nesting of how this works, right? We have our home page, right, component, and then inside of that we have our header. That means that props are passed down into the children, in other words, from the parent, the home page, into the children, the header, okay? You'll understand this more as you actually work with it. Okay, using props. In your homepage component, you can pass a custom title prop to the header component, just like you'd pass HTML attributes, right? So in a image tag, we have this source attribute. In a link tag, we have an href attribute. We can create our own attributes. So with our header tag, we're going to delete the second one that we did, and we're going to create a prop called title, and we're going to type React into that, okay? And header, the child component, can accept those props as its first function parameter. So we have our header, and inside our parameter list, we're going to put props, okay? If you console log props, remember we're inside a function here. So this is JavaScript. We can do things like console log now. If you console log props, you can see that it's an object with a title property. So let's try it out. Console.log props. Go to our page. And there we go. We have, I'm going to just clear this up, reload. So you can see, there we go. We have our object with title props, right? So we have a props object, which is being passed into the header component, and we're console logging it. Cool. Since props is an object, you can use object destructuring to explicitly name the values of props inside your function parameters. So we can destructure right inside our parameter list using curly braces, and we can just destructure the title. And so I'm assuming they're going to have us write the title here. and we can console log that. And there we go. We actually have now just the value in our key value pair here of React, right? Because we destructure that object. And if you're not familiar with destructuring, there's a link here for object destructuring. That is something that you're going to use quite a bit in React and Next.js. So I definitely recommend that you learn how to do it. It's a quite simple concept once you get the hang of it, but give it a try and experiment with it a little bit so that you get to understand what it is if you're not fully familiar. Next, then you can replace the content of your h1 tag with a title variable, right? So we console logged it, but now we can just take this and put title, okay? If you open your file in the browser, you'll see that this is displaying the actual word title. This is because React thinks you're intending to render a plain text string to the DOM. So we wrote title here, and if we go to our page, we actually see the word title, and that's because, like it said, React is thinking you're just trying to write title in an h1 tag, when in fact we're trying to use a variable here, okay? So we need a way to tell React that this is a JavaScript variable and not just a string. So using variables in JSX, to use the title prop, add curly braces. These are special JSX syntax that allows you to write regular JavaScript directly in your JSX markup. So if we surround the word title with curly braces, we are now telling our transpiler Babel that this is a JavaScript variable and not just text. And so now if we go back, we should see, wow, it changed to React, which is what we're passing in here. Pretty cool. You can think of curly braces as a way to enter JavaScript land while you're in JSX land, right? So anytime that you're writing JSX and you want to use some JavaScript like a variable and you want to, say, hey, this is JavaScript, you just wrap everything in curly braces. You can add any JavaScript expression, something that evaluates to a single value inside curly braces. For example, an object property with dot notation. So previously we destructured, but we could have actually, and I'll just show you real quick, we could have left this as props. We're going to just delete our console log. And we could have actually just put in, using dot notation, props dot title. And we will get the same thing, page reloads, and there we go, we have React again, right? We can reload and you see it's the same thing. So we can also add a template literal. So if I go back, keep that destructured now, right? I can add a template literal. So let's say we want to add cool title. We can use our backticks. And I can write the word cool. And then again, using template literal, we use our $ and curly braces to say this is JavaScript. And now we have cool title. Okay. Or the return value of a function, right? So let's try this one. Now, this is pretty interesting. So they're writing another function here. Function create title. Takes in the title. And there's an if statement, which I'll just copy and paste. Fix this up a little bit. Cool. So this if statement is saying if there's a title, then return that title, else return default title. And now in our curly braces, instead of our template literal, we're going to have that. Now remember, this is in another function called create title, which is up here on line 10. And we're going to pass in the title. Okay. So let's look at like everything that's happening real quick here. So we have our header. We're passing in a prop, right? Our props have title, and our title is React. And then here inside of our header, we're using this other function to create the title, and we're passing in our prop, right, from here. And that's going in here, which is just a regular JavaScript function, and it's checking if there's a title that exists, return the title, else return default title, right? So now if I look at the page, it should say React. And if I perhaps make this blank, now we get our default title because there's really no title being passed in here. So it's checking if there's a title, and if not, we're getting our default. Pretty cool. Okay, or we can use ternary operators. So something that evaluates to true or false, right? So instead of this whole other function, we can really just do this in one step. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to check, is there a title with a question mark? If there is, then we're going to return that title. And if not, we're going to return default title. Right? So we did that whole function that was up there basically in one line. And here we go. We have React. And again, if I remove this, we'll get default title again. Pretty cool. All right. You can now pass any string to your title prop, or if you use the ternary operator, you could even not pass a title prop at all since you're accounting for the default case in your component. So we just did that so you could see it, right? We passed nothing and we got that default title, but if we pass a string in here, then we'll get it. And this, I believe, should also work if we don't even have that prop in there, right? We're going to get our default title. But if we do, then it goes back to the title that we added. Okay. And they're just showing you how this works here. Your component now accepts a generic title prop, which you can reuse in different parts of your application. All you need to do is change the title string. So if, let's say, now in our home page, we place 2 headers and we have a new title, now we can display both with one component, right? We're only using this one component. We're reusing the code, but because we're adding different props, we can actually render different content. This is one of the most powerful parts of React. Okay, iterating through lists. This is a very common design pattern that you'll see in React, right? So it's common to have data that you need to show as a list. You can use array methods to manipulate your data and generate UI elements that are identical in style but hold different pieces of information. Add the following array of names to your home page component. Now, remember, I talked a lot about like an e-commerce store. So think about you have all these different products and they come into your app as a list of products, right? Or maybe a list of objects of products. And we want to iterate through those and create a card maybe for each product that we display on the page. So how are we going to do that? Well, let's see. So inside our homepage, we're going to create const names. In this case, we're going to use names. We're going to do Ada. Okay, so we have 3 names in our list. And then we can then use the array.map method to iterate over the array and use an arrow function to map a name to a list item. Okay, so inside of our home page, we're going to have our header, okay? And they're going back to the plain one that we had. So I'm going to do at develop. This is just to really copy what they're doing. You don't really need to do this, but I'm going to remove the other one. And then we're going to have an unordered list. So a UL, right? And we need that closing. And then inside of these Again, remember, we're going to use these curly braces to say, hey, this is some JavaScript that we're writing. Okay, so we have our curly braces and we're going to say names.map. And so we're going to use the map method, which is basically going to have, it's going to map over our array. And it's going to say for each name in the array that we have here, render. And this is important. These have to be parentheses here, not curly braces. So if you do curly braces, you're writing a function, and we don't want to do that. We want to map through this array and return, basically, for each name, we're going to create a list element, and we're going to put in our name, again in curly braces, because we don't want it to just say name. We want to take the name in from this array as we map over it, okay? So I already read this part. You can use the array map method like we just did and use an arrow function. So we just did that to map the name to a list item. Notice how you've used curly braces to weave in and out of JavaScript and JSX land. So, we were in JavaScript land, and then now we went into JSX land right here with the LI, and then back into JavaScript land. Oops, let me undo that. So now let's look at our page, and there we go. We have mapped over this array and made each of these a list item. Pretty cool. If you run this code, React will give us a warning about missing a key prop. So if I reload the page, you can see we have this warning. Each child in a list should have a unique key prop. So we talked about what props are. This is because React needs something to uniquely identify items in an array so it knows which elements to update in the DOM. So we're mapping over this, and React needs a way to say, hey, like this is this element, this is this one, this is this one, right? So that when we update things, it updates correctly. You can use the names for now since they're currently unique, but it's recommended to use something guaranteed to be unique, like an item ID. And you will see sometimes people do something like this, where they put an index value in here and then use that as the key. That is not very recommended because those index values are not always going to be unique when we update and delete things. So we just usually want to use something like an ID. And if you're mapping over like a product or something like that, in the case of like an e-commerce store, there should be some sort of product ID that's unique to that product that we can use in this case. So how are we going to implement that key? Well, we're going to add it like an attribute to everything else. So in our list item, so in each iteration that we're going through, we're going to put in like another attribute, but instead of quotes, we're going to again go into JavaScript land and put in the name, right? So these names are unique. Again, we have to be sure that these are going to be unique because it's going to affect the rendering of this. Okay, so if I go back, if I go back here, I just reload the page and you'll see now we have no issues. There's no error there. Okay, so additional resources, passing props to a component, rendering lists, and conditional rendering. Definitely check those out. That will be lots of good information if you are new to React. It is quiz time. Test your knowledge and see what you have learned. What are props used for in React? Are they used for writing CSS rules, passing information to components, or adding attributes to HTML elements? Take a few seconds and think about it. 3, 2, 1. I'm going to say B, passing information to components. Check my answer, and there you go. I'm correct. Props can be passed to components similarly to HTML attributes, but you can pass any JavaScript value through them, including objects and functions. All right, that is it for chapter 5 for chapter 6. Wow, we are moving through it. You learned how to use props to display data. Congratulations. So in the next video, we're going to walk through adding interactivity with state, and this is where the magic really starts to happen with React. So make sure you follow along and continue through this. I will see you in the next video.